Hi everyone, I'm Ernestina, and I'm currently at the University of Manchester with my co-author Vincenzo De Masi at the Guangdong University of Foreign Studies. And today we're going to present our research in generative uncertainty, AI video creation, and contemporary visual epistemologies. So, good afternoon, everyone. And this presentation explores how generative artificial intelligence is transforming not only how moving images are produced, but how visual knowledge itself is structured in general. So, our focus of the research is on AI-driven video creation as a site of uncertainty, where images are no longer stable representations of reality, but problematic and probabilistic formations that emerge from latent computational spaces. So we argue that AI video does not simply automate filmmaking, but instead it fundamentally reconfigures the authorship, narrative control, and visual epistemology, and the very conditions through which images become meaningful. So rather than treating AI as a tool for efficiency or realism, we approach it as a medium that produces unstable, speculative, and continuously shifting visual worlds. Okay, so first, we're going to talk a little bit about from representation to emergence. So traditionally, cinema has been grounded in what we might call the indextical relation, which images are traces of events that have occurred in front of a camera. But in prompt-based and diffusion-driven AI video systems, this relationship breaks down. So there's no stable profilmic reality and no guaranteed event behind this image. So instead, what we see are outputs generated from statistical inference within the latent spaces. This is what we're referring to as how the technology is changing the production process. So in this case, AI-generated visuals are not representations in the classical sense. They're closer to what we might call as visual hypothesis more than anything. So temporary stabilization of probability rather than fixed depiction of reality here. So this shift had profound implications, which means that we once understood as filming becomes something else and closer to sampling from possibility. So there's the change that exists here. So AI video and narrative instability. So one of the key features of generative video systems is their inherent instability. So across many early generative AI films and experimental works, we observed that visual drift from characters subtly change to identity, the environment mutant, and spatial logic becomes inconsistent in general. For example, the experimental works such as the Frost 2023 narrative coherence does not emerge during the generation itself. Instead, it's constructed afterwards, which through editing, selection, and human curator intervention in general. So similarly, in the last call before dawn 2024, AI-assisted reproduction AI production deliberately foregrounds a temporal and spatial instability, which means the time and the space. Rather than correcting these inconsistencies, the film incorporates them as expressive material. So here, the instability is not a failure of the system, it becomes a narrative resource in general. And we begin to see how meaning in AI video is often resembled retroactively rather than encoded in advance. Then. So for the theoretical framework that we adopted, so to understand these shifts, we situate AI video within three overlapping theoretical perspectives in general. So firstly is the post-cinematic theory, which examines how digital and computational systems displays classical cinematic structures of continuity, framing, and indexical realism, which is more of the interplay between technology and the media production. And secondly, media archaeology, which allows us to see AI video not as a rupture, but as a part of a longer history of image technologies that decouple vision from human perception. And thirdly is critical studies of automation, which interrogate how creative agency is redistributed across human and non-human actors. factors. So from these perspectives, AI-generated video can be understood as a post-indexical medium. It's no longer record events. Instead, it generates image from statistical probability spaces, and this challenges foundational assumptions about authorship. And so we're going to ask a question about who's the author of the AI-generated image then? The prompt writer, the model, the data set, or the system architecture itself? So the answer becomes very distributed, unstable, and continuously negotiated, which becomes a process here. So the case study of the contemporary practice. So we now turn to contemporary creative applications that illustrate these dynamics. For example, in music video production such as Washed Out, the hardest part, AI-enhanced version in 2023, we see how generative systems produce morphing bodies, unstable environments, and fluid camera logic. So rather than attempting to correct these effects, artists often preserve them deliberately, using instability as an aesthetic strategy. So across these works, visual incoherence becomes associated with memory, emotion, and technological mediation there. So also observe AI-generated reconstruction experimental documentary contexts, which these include simulations of inaccessible or vanished spaces, the archives that do not exist in photographic form, but are reconstructed through generative inference. So in such cases, visual instability becomes central to the epistemic status of the image. And it signals not uncertainty, but absence, not documentation, but speculative reconstruction, as we talked about it before. So the aesthetic of uncertainty. So across these examples, we can identify a recurring set of phenomena, which is the visual drift, the character inconsistency, temporal rupture, and the narrative discontinuity. Rather than treating them as technical errors, we argue that they form an emerging aesthetic of uncertainty in general. So this aesthetic reflects broader cultural conditions shaped by technological acceleration, data saturation, and epistemic instability. So in this sense, AI video does not simply reflect uncertainty, it produces as a form condition of visual experience. So at the end, to conclude, we propose that AI video creation makes a shift from image production to visual world making. So in this paradigm, the images are no longer endpoints of the representation, they are processes. The open systems in which meaning is continuously negotiated between human intentions and algorithm emergence. So creative agency is no longer located in a single authorial subject. Instead, it's distributed across prompts, datasets, model architectures, and post-production decisions. So understanding these shifts is crucial and allows us to think what usual knowledge means in an era where images are no longer recorded but generated. And it opens up a new question as well. If images no longer refer to a stable reality, what kinds of reality are they beginning to produce? And this is a question we're going to leave it to you as well. Thank you.